Oh, right. Yes. Sometimes, yeah, Zoom will do it to us. And I see, yeah, lots of people joining in. So I will start the chat. I'll say, hi, where are you from? So as usual on our webinars, we'll use the chat for any comments. Actually, that only went to panelists. I will send that to everyone. Hi, where are you from? So we can find out where people are from. I see some familiar names there on the list, which is great, like Damien and Terry. Great. And we'll also use the Q&A section of Zoom. So as Merve and I are discussing, if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A section and we will get to those as they come up. And so Merve, thank you so much for being on the show. And I wanted to ask you to kick us off by asking you about your background and your career journey. Can you give us an overview of your career so far and a bit of an origin story about what pulled you into AI and AI ethics? How did you get here today, where you are today?
Absolutely, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to make it short, but it ties up at the end.
Oh, I'm happy with long stories, yeah.
Somehow it worked at the end. I'm the founder of AIethicist.org and Lighthouse Career Consulting. So I provide training consulting services to help build capacity for individuals as well as organizations towards ethical and responsible development, as well as deployment of AI. I also collaborate with a number of international organizations to create awareness and build some AI governance methods and systems. I'm an AI ethics instructor at RMDS Lab, editorial board member at Springer Nature and AI Ethics Journal, contributors to a couple of different IEEE work groups, and for Humanity Fellow working on building an AI audit standard. So trying to juggle those. But I actually started my career right after my undergrad with a German bank. I said I would never work for a bank. And their first career was a German bank. And then when Merrill Lynch decided to come into the Turkish market, I was recruited as the third person into the company and was tasked with building the Istanbul office from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So did that, and next year helped build a Moscow office from scratch, and then the year after that helped consolidate 5 of our offices in Milan, Italy.
Wow.
So there was a lot of project management and operations and a lot of like moving things. Right after 2008 crisis, so you remember I'm working for Merrill Lynch. Mm-hmm. It became Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and I was asked to become country HR manager for Turkey. So did that for a couple of years. 2010, I was asked to move to London, UK, to join the campus recruitment team. So I was in charge of diversity recruitment technologies, recruitment process overview and benchmarking, and regulatory compensation. And then because of my husband's work, and I left Bank of America and moved to Marriott, and I was a director of sales for them in Turkey, back in Turkey for a couple of years. But how this all connects to what I'm doing right now is the work allowed me, so my previous work allowed me to see how changes you make in technology or in processes and policies can create extra obstacles for people, for certain populations, right? You're creating obstacles, potentially creating obstacles for them to access resources and opportunities. So after 20 years of corporate work, I decided to move to nonprofit and was lucky enough to work with this nonprofit in Nevada. I'm still working, obviously, High Sierra Industries. Mm-hmm. So we develop learning systems and technologies for people with disabilities. So I am able to see every single day what people with disabilities are experiencing and what obstacles they have in their way, and how some of these technologies are, again, excluding that population as well. So along with that, a while back, I founded, like I said, AIethicist.org, which is my platform to kind of got out of my frustration of not finding information in one place. It's like, why is this not in one place if you're coming into this world of AI ethics and bias, etc. So I decided to bring everything together, and it's a platform where I manage the content, update the content at like a couple of weeks or a couple of times a month. But yeah, this kind of came together with all the diversity work, technology work, nonprofit work, and project stuff, and different backgrounds, and it just came together.
That's nice. And when did you get interested in AI ethics, and how was the journey between starting on your interest in AI ethics and then studying AI ethicists?
So the AI piece came with the technology piece, or with the recruitment technology. So that's a relatively older one that I was at the very beginning of, like video interviews, video analysis, etc. When I was still in this work, and I was looking at different recruitment processes for. This was when I was in London, so I was able to like benchmark different banks, telecom companies, etc. Almost like a independent consultant against them, and I was able to see, talk to senior recruiters. Okay, what are you using? What are your like some of the pains? What are you experiencing? How is this impacting your work and your pool? So AI started there, and then ethics piece kind of rolled on from, okay, we are doing this on one end. Or some vendors are doing this one end, and we're implementing, and there are some unethical pieces within this, or we're creating biases. At one hand, we're like working really hard to break down discrimination, increase our diversity, create standard procedures and policies, or bring in tools to reduce bias. But on the other hand, because the technology is so new and unregulated, and people don't understand the ins and outs of it, and they to a certain serious extent, and especially HR work, they still don't. I wanted to go into that, but I think one of the stories, like the initial stories years ago, was this experiment that I was reading, where this researcher group was training 2 AIs on autonomous vehicles. One was like self-learning, and the function was go from A to B as quick as possible. The other one was go through A to B, but these are the constraints. And what ended up with the first one, without those constraints and ethical concerns, etc. So that caught my attention, like totally unrelated to recruiting stuff and HR stuff. And I'm like, wait, like, why is this happening? I need to look more into that. And it just became a rabbit hole. And
It's good. It's really good. And was there a particular example that you saw in your work, maybe on the recruitment side? Was there any example that helped you go into this path as well? Were there any sort of alarming things that maybe you saw firsthand that you could share?
Seeing firsthand is when I was doing, like looking at talking to different senior recruiters, not something I implemented, but emotion analysis and facial analysis. So this was pretty much for me is pseudoscience without any validity about success on a particular job, as well as facial analysis, and a lot of the effective analysis pieces having ties back to eugenics and phrenology, etc. Just like having people think of these inborn traits or physical traits being a suggestion or an indicator of your success, indicator of your character. So those were like the initial ones. They're like, whoa, it's like we've been there, done that in the past. We know where this goes. So I'm weird enough, it's still mushrooming left and right. It's like every single week you see another one of these algorithms or softwares being marketed. So I think we're not there in terms of spreading that word, but yeah, that was one of my first concerns.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I think a lot of people I guess it's an easy place to go to in your mind to think, or if we could analyze, the emotions of people during an interview when you ask them a question and they get nervous. Does that mean that they don't know that answer very well? But as you say, like it's unfair because people might express emotions differently. And it should be more their capability. That's a really good point. And we have a question from Srikanth that says, ethical AI, is it a myth in such a competitive world where companies and countries are competing against each other and trying to outdo each other, beat each other? Does that mean that ethical AI becomes a myth or something that is not focused on enough? What do you think, Merv?
I don't think it's a myth. I think if I thought there was a myth, I wouldn't be, chasing a myth. I seriously think that if you're looking at this from a business perspective, there are incentives. One, I should put it out there. It's like, don't throw AI and AI solutions to every problem. Just because you can, don't do it. But having said that, if you're a company providing AI solutions or looking to implement AI solutions, there's definitely incentives of doing this ethically and responsibly, especially in this world of news spreading quickly, social media and your consumer base being really responsive to things. You don't want to be on the wrong side of history, and second, responsible development, ethical development has its impact on the bottom line. And personally, I really think that if you're able to align your values, your like organizational company values to your product, and there are examples of those companies were very successful, I think you can actually make a brand differentiation with that as well.
Definitely a brand differentiation, and something that as people learn more about it and become more aware, it's something that the market is going to start to demand more and more of it. And do you have any examples where it has helped the bottom line of the company?
Yes, I'm not going to name names because
totally fine. Yep.
I don't want to be endorsing any product, but there has been, I have come across multiple companies where the founders or the CEO really believes in responsible development, responsible innovation. So they were very involved in, making sure that their teams, their processes, their whole development cycle, as well as the implementation cycle, was well documented, responsible, reviewed multiple times. So they were like unleashing anything out to the wild before like being really confident with their product. And even then, they had all these like feedback channels open for if something that they hadn't foreseen would come. That feedback channel was out, and they also opened their algorithms and their source code to third party. I'm not suggesting that should be applicable to every single company, but I think if you really trust your product and want to make a better product out of it, those third party audits and reviews are certainly one way of doing this as well.
That's really good. And how about in terms of the development of the product and the AI? Have you seen some approaches that have been more successful in in making ethical AI and introducing more fairness and less bias?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it starts with data, on like understanding the problem itself and understanding your outcomes, what you want to get out of that. And then going back, before you collect anything, before you start working on any data, trying to understand the context of the problem. So if you're talking about housing, understanding, if you're talking about US, I know you're in Australia, but in US, you need to understand the history of redlining and discriminatory housing and lending practices. You need to understand the eviction policies here. You need to understand how credit scores build into that. If you're thinking about doing anything about schools, AI for school performance, etc., you need to understand how the data might be impacted to its in inner city versus suburban schools, and where that is coming from, and some of the historical segregation and how that ties in with the funding, etc. So before you even collect any data or start working on any data, just understanding that context, and talking to people who actually have been involved in this issue, in this problem before, and trying to get their perspectives, and then start going into the development, and obviously every single stage of that development, from data collection, pre-processing, training, model your features, your validation stuff, every single step of the way, making sure that you're reviewing and everyone is voicing their concerns, etc.
Makes sense. So do you think that starting with the importance of starting with the context is to understand the biases that exist in the I guess in the world as it has been in society, and then how that's captured in the data, and by understanding those biases before going into the data preparation and modeling phases, then a developer would be more aware of the biases as they start to come up in the algorithm and be able to correct for them. Is that sort of one of the main aims of understanding?
It is one of the main aims, and you're looking at the different angles. Certainly, understanding your data better, and understanding how that data might be biased, and if possible, correcting for it, or looking at different data point, different data sets, and but also understanding, okay, what has been tried. Like if you're talking with the experts on irrelevant AI outside of your project team, if you're talking to experts, subject matter experts, or people who have been working on this issue for longer than your data scientist, you also get an understanding of what kind of solutions were brought in previously to solve this question. Yes. So you're not trying to discover the same thing or work on the same thing again. Understanding that, and we always talk about different perspectives, diverse teams, etc. You might not always have a diverse team inside the organization, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be going outside of your organization and get that feedback and kind of talk to the people who might be impacted by this, and understanding that when we're talking about ethical and responsible way, that encompasses everything, right? So you start you're heavy on the first end. For me, you're very heavy on the first end, and then work through that understanding, that rather than bringing in a data scientist who doesn't see, who's only looking at the data but nothing else, not the history of it, not the current issues of it, or other problems that might not be in the data.
Yeah, exactly. That's so important. And tell me a little bit about the reviews that you were talking about throughout the project. I see that as another area where getting outside help would really help focus on the key components, or maybe help drive workshops. What does that review process look like in your experience when people are working on AI that they want to be fair and ethical?
It looks like it starts with the capacity building and understanding the different project management styles. So every organization has their is using a different project management methodology, right? So you can't really bring in one single thing and like apply. So it is very much sitting down with the team or the project manager and understanding what the organization methodology is and their processes and what the team structure is, and kind of work through that. And once you know the team structure, you know, kind of work through, okay, does this work from a responsibles, and like who are you missing in this team and what they can contribute to it. And then looking at you know, working with the whole team in terms of, okay, when we're looking at this step, you know, when you're talking about, okay, these are the features that we're going to use, or these are what outcome looks like, or what success looks like on the other end. You know, this is what, you know, is this accuracy level enough or not, whatever, you know, just having that, building that trust within the team, and then giving everyone the ability to review their, to review the product in every, or the life cycle in every step. And also something that is usually missed, especially on the startup area, like when you're fighting against time and resources, is documentation. Especially on the AI side, you make like decisions very quickly, sometimes without actually having, you know, discussed the consequences, and then we come as like unintended consequences. A lot of the time, those unintended consequences could have been mitigated or could have been foreseen or mitigated if you had the space to discuss this, or had the space and the tools to review this stuff. So a lot of that review is actually, you know, not rushing through things, but having this like ethics canvas in front of you and asking the right questions.
Exactly. And I think that leads us to AI governance during the development and deployment, and once it's in production. What are your views on AI governance? Who owns it in the organization, and how do we create that space for data scientists to be able to have those reviews during the creation process?
So when we say AI governance, I want to split that to, you know, soft or soft governance versus hard governance. Hard governance is where you would talk about legislation and fines and penalties and constraints that come with regulation or regulators. So that's not there in pretty much any country. I mean, okay, GDPR is you know, you have GDPR in EU, you have impact assessments to a certain extent in Canada, and in California, not the US, but in California, you have the Consumer Privacy Act, etc. But that hard governance is very much lacking across the board globally. But to your question, inside the organization, whose responsibility is AI governance? I would say everyone, but it definitely starts at the C-level before anyone else. The C-level commitment is first, and leaders being models to the rest of the organization, rest of the employees, in terms of the priorities, their actions. You know, it's about embedding those organizational values and principles into your model, into your processes and procedures, your hiring practices, your incentives, to the culture, into the culture of your organization. I don't know if you've read it, but there's a famous Peter Drucker quote. He's a management guru. It says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So you might, as you know, you might have your whole strategy of like 5-year, 10-year plan. This is what our product is going to do. This is what we're doing. But if the culture of your organization has bought into that priority and action, and that if that hasn't been supported by the C-level, there is no way that you're gonna succeed in that. So governance, it's everyone's responsibility to be responsible and have an ethical approach. But it definitely starts with culture as well. It's you as a data scientist or developer might develop an amazing product, but if your sales team is reflecting that in a wrong way, in an unethical way, or trying to sell a product that doesn't work for a client, that's also goes into ethics. If your customers or if you haven't trained your clients properly on some of the constraints or issues or possible issues with the product, then that lack of training, lack of implementation training is also an ethics thing. If you're not providing that feedback from your clients, from the end user, from people being impacted, and building that feedback to monitoring the impact and building that feedback back to your product, that's also goes into ethics and responsible development. So it's the whole end-to-end cycle and end-to-end company culture.
That's great. That's great because yeah, at my day job, we've been discussing this, and I'm a head of data science, and my team and I created the model governance framework for ethical AI, and we are implementing those processes in our teams, but we're also trying to encourage the rest of the organization to be a part of it as stakeholders and users, and a lot of these AI products are presented as the whole company's products, so they definitely need to be involved and take responsibility. So I'm glad to hear your views. That I'm definitely gonna let them know that's and
I mean, if something is successful, it's like, yeah, we did this as a team. If something goes wrong, it was the developer, it was the data scientist.
So true. Yes. And we have a question from Simon who says, are the main ethical questions ones of ensuring representative samples across the board and trying to avoid misrepresentation of what the models get to see, and essentially avoiding misrepresenting the intended customer, user, or target? Is it about having the statistical samples across each of the categories that you care about, or is there more to it?
There is more to it. I mean, data and the biases that are involved, that are in the data, whether it's like representation or selection bias or any bias that you might be, parity. It's like anything that is related to data is the main factor in it. But going back to what I said about, just because you can, should you, one of the examples of this is predictive policing, right? So it starts with, it's not a data question at the beginning. It's more about intended outcomes and values of what you're using this for. So if you're trying to predict someone's, I want to say, risk or possibility of committing a crime before that happens, you're taking away that person, that autonomy, that person's dignity, that person's the whole legal due process, etc. So you're trying to bring in this algorithm where you're really not only impacting someone's life, especially with all the other data stuff and the bias that goes with it, but also, should you be why are we not giving people the benefit of that? Can you, if you've committed a crime in the past, are you always a criminal? Don't you have the dignity of of that one-time failure? Can you not become a better citizen, a better person, a better father or mother, whatever it is? Do we not give you that option? At the end of the day, a lot of these algorithms are about defining a worthiness for someone. So, are you worthy of being a free citizen? Are you worthy of being hired? Are you worthy of being given a credit, or are you worthy of being admitted to a college, etc. And the list goes on, right? So you, as a data scientist, as a developer, as a project team, are defining worthiness. And I would like to be really careful at the beginning. So this doesn't have anything to do with data. This is about the values, the principles, the concept, and what you want to bring into society, right?
Exactly. And I really like that you take that approach. That one mistake shouldn't define your entire life, and that the decisions that the algorithms are making are important to each individual who is being touched by these decisions. And the algorithm could be making hundreds of thousands of these decisions per day, but each person is going to have the experience of being told that they're worthy or unworthy of whatever they're seeking. So it's a really important piece to keep in mind, that the human impact behind these technologies. That's
at the end of the day, so you're talking about power, right? You're talking about imposing power, whether that is a private company's power like big tech, or imposing power of a state, a government, on its citizens. So again, going back to predictive policing and data issues, that not only the concept itself, but as a data scientist, you might have done all your work about the data, understanding the representations, understanding making sure all protected classes, etc., are represented in your data. You understood the stuff. You've done everything you could for like a fair outcome.
Yeah.
As much as I don't believe in the whole predictive policing thing, but let's hold on to that for a second. The previous step before that becomes data is incentive mechanisms within policing, incentive mechanisms that work between the state policing versus federal policing. And what are the are you checking your stats, like is the police department for say Sydney trying to meet certain performance benchmarks and certain arrest numbers, etc., so to be able to get their budget for next year, or to be able to get certain grants for equipment, etc. Because that is the case in US. It's like your police departments are measured against certain statistics, and the budget and the grants that they get are tied to those statistics. So just because you can get that, you're going into certain neighborhoods and arresting more people, and for good or right, or for like petty crime, etc. So you're changing those stats, right? And then you, as a good-willed data scientist or developer, coming into this project without knowing the politics behind it, are kind of contributing to the whole system, if I may say so.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And by being unaware of the reality of the situation and the incentives behind the metrics, or the incentives that the metrics create, you are blindly contributing. That's so true. What suggestions would you have for people that want to make a change in their organizations and encourage them to become more focused on AI ethics?
I would say be intentional about it to start with. And if like I said, if you're a C-level executive, the founder, if you're in a startup where you're making like decisions, or you're involved in the decision-making system, try to be the model, and walk. If you really believe in responsible and ethical decision-making and development, walk the talk. Don't try to. If someone has brought some concerns to you, don't dismiss them out of hand, giving that voice to the people who can bring in concerns, creating that space and tools where anyone can bring a concern about the product, the potential consequences down the line can bring so, and they don't have to go the route of whistleblower. If you set this right, if you're intentional about this, and if you set this right, you shouldn't, there shouldn't even be a need for whistleblower policies or protections. And also giving the space to people to learn. I understand like the deadlines and the time constraints and trying to hit the market as soon as possible. And the concept of, launch and then reiterate, and, like you can break it first and then you'll come back to fix it maybe. A lot of the times not. Changing that mindset and be intentional about understanding what you're breaking and what you're shaking, and before you launch things.
Yes, I think that's really good advice. And I know I wanted to ask you with everything that you've done in your career, and with everything that you're amazingly juggling at the moment, which is incredible. What are you most proud of that you've done in your career?
So I'll go back to my time with diversity recruitment. So I was the first person into that role, and I was first person to have the role of campus diversity recruitment for Bank of America. And that was across like 20-something countries. So me and my team would be traveling to, colleges across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and hold workshops, career coaching, career fairs, etc. And on one hand, I had my, numbers of, we got to increase, the applicant pool, the diversity of the applicant pool. We got to hire this many students. We got to do hire this many students into this business, etc. And then you're talking to the students and you're listening to their passion and their strengths, and you're like, no, you really don't want to be in this environment. And I say this with the utmost love for my previous job. It's investment banking has a lot of issues, has a lot of ethical issues and trading, but also has amazingly smart people. So I learned a lot of what I've learned on HR and HR technology stuff in that environment. But what I'm proud of it is not trying to cold sell different jobs to the students, and actually sitting down with them and say, so what makes you excited, what motivates you, what are your strengths, where do you see yourself in 5 years? If you were in this position, you would be doing this. Is this going to make you happy? And kind of take it case by case. I think it's definitely worked out for my sanity, and I'm able to sleep at nights. But I also get a lot of feedback from the people, from the students that I used to coach, that I talked, even now, that it's like, hey, I just finished my PhD, or hey, I just got promoted in this company. It's like they're still keeping in touch, and that makes a difference for me.
Right? Yeah, that would make a huge difference. That is incredible. And tell me, where can people find you online and follow your work? Is there anything that people can do to get involved? Where's the places to go?
Definitely LinkedIn. So my main presence, as you might see from my post, is LinkedIn, keeping busy there. But also, if you're interested in anything that has to do with AI, ethics, bias, explainability, principles, ethical principles, national strategies, etc., I would definitely channel them to the website, to aiethicist.org. And that is really not about, that doesn't have anything to do with any for-profit thing. That is literally a platform for any researchers or anyone who's coming in to understand this better. And if I'm missing anything, feel free to ping me and say, hey, this is relevant for this and might be relevant for other people coming in.
I love it. I love it. Look at this. We got two questions came in at the same time. This is great. Natalie asks, what are the top 3 resources and or books that Merv would recommend to anyone willing to learn more about ethics in AI?
So looking at the back.
Hey, nice. You can get a shot of the library there. Zoom in.
Yeah, I'll just zoom in. I would definitely say Shoshana Zuboff, Surveillance Capitalism. Start with that. That's the thick one behind me. Design Justice from Sasha Costanza. So you're understanding, we talked about ethical design and responsible development. So design justice is definitely a methodology that I strongly believe in. And if you're also coming in from, what AI can do, what some of the issues with what we talked about, the data, background of data, techno-chauvinism, throwing AI solutions, etc. I would definitely suggest Ruha Benjamin's Race After Technology to understand both, what data can cause issues and also the techno-solution side and how to avoid that. So those would be my top 3.
That's great. Can you say the name of the first one again?
Shoshana Zuboff, Surveillance Capitalism.
Surveillance, yes. I'm just looking them up. Nice. And we'll include them in the show notes as well. That is.
Do you want me to grab them and show?
Show. We'll include the links. That is fantastic. And the last comment is from Simon. He says, thank you. Predictive policing and the concept of worthiness and gaming for personal benefit based off AI results. This was really clear, very well put, and really interesting.
Can I do one more plug? So a couple of weeks ago, David Ryan Polgar, All Tech Human, All Tech is Human, and about 25 of us as contributors. So we just launched the Responsible Tech Guide. It's online. It is, if you go to my posts, you can see that, or if you Google Responsible Tech Guide, you can see that as well. If you're new to this and if you want to do more about responsible innovation, responsible tech, AI ethics, it's like 160 pages plus resources, career profiles, recommendations, etc. So I strongly recommend that.
Wow, that is fantastic.
That was, it was great effort to put it together, and the outcome is, I think, is pretty good as well.
Yeah, it looks like a huge amount of work. Well done. And with a lot of really interesting contributors. How long were you working on this and involved in it?
Well, it was, like I said, it's David kicked it off, and it was, I want to say 25 or 30 of us that worked at it for more than a month, from all over the world, and contributors from all over the world. It was like amazing to see it come together. But yes. I think that's also what responsible tech is about, open source, collaboration, keeping each other in check and keeping each other honest, and sharing the experiences.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that, and we'll include that link in the show notes as well. Merve, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, your journey and all your work is inspirational, and your explanations, as we heard from Simon there, they really capture people's hearts and minds with the clarity and how elegant your descriptions are. So thank you so much for helping us be better AI ethicists.
I'm humbled by that. I appreciate the space and opportunity, Felipe.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Definitely come back to the next one. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.